Sure, it's just another vlog about just another book by just another girl living in a post-colonial world where we try not to die trying. Have some coffee, take a seat, and let's read.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Weena Wonders. So for those of you guys who may not know this about me, although at this point I feel like everyone who watches this channel might know this about me, I'm currently taking my Master of Fine Arts degree in Creative Writing at De La Salle University, Manila, and in particular I am going down the poetry track. So I'm currently working on my thesis, and yeah, after my final defense, I will be free to graduate. So yeah, I'm very excited about that. So today I thought I would do another grad school video, this time focusing on how to survive your first writing workshop. For those of you guys who may not have been through a writing workshop before, or who aren't familiar yet with the format of a writing workshop, like maybe you're just starting to get into the program, or maybe you've submitted to a workshop and you got chosen and now you're kind of freaking out about it. Basically, the way that it works is that there is a panel of established writers. So whatever established means in that context, like if you're doing this for a school org, then established can sometimes mean alumni from that org. If you're doing like one of those national-wide workshops, in particular I went to the UST one, then the established writers would be from the faculty, or writers who are already published or who've been awarded multiple times in their writing careers, and so on and so forth. So there will be people there who are established already, and then there will be the fellows. So the fellows would be you as a participant, basically the people whose work is being workshopped. And then of course there is the sort of workshop admin and staff. They're the people who are holding the workshop or facilitating the workshop. In the grad school context, we usually have workshops for specific classes. So for example, in my particular program, we had sort of a lecture or like a techniques class, and then we had a workshop class. So we had poetry techniques and poetry workshop, and we had fiction techniques and fiction workshop, playwriting techniques and playwriting workshop, and so on and so forth. And I think that workshopping is something that is on the one hand like kind of debated in its effectivity for a couple of reasons that maybe I could make a whole other video about. Tell me in the comments below if you're interested in that. But yeah, it's a very like well debated form of giving critique, but I do think that there's a reason why in the grad school program context specifically, it is kind of essential. And I think that that's really to be able to prepare you for first your thesis defense, or being able to talk about your work in a manner that's constructive, that sort of highlights points of criticism, and which can respond to critique of your work in a way that's informed without being defensive, or without sort of lecturing the panel or your other fellows on your work. It just really sort of teaches you to be able to evaluate and critique work, and also to be able to take criticism for your work. So yeah, this video is going to focus on 5 tips that I think you really need to sort of take into consideration if you are going to be workshopped for the first time. My first tip is forget about your ego. Like, don't take anything personally. I think that going into a workshop, everyone kind of knows that whatever they're submitting is work that they're submitting because they need feedback on it. So that already sort of assumes, or it sort of works on the premise that that work you're submitting isn't perfect. And so when people kind of critique your work, or if they say something, even if it's a little bit edgy, I don't think that you should be very cagey about it, if that makes sense. Like, for example, a critique that I've heard people say a lot is like, this part seems like it was written lazily. when people say that, they don't mean that you as a person are lazy. They're critiquing the work, not you. So what they're saying is that it could have been written in a way that maybe did more research, or in a way that was more creative or more inventive. They're pointing out possibilities for your writing. They're not shooting down what you've written necessarily. So yeah, I would say forget about your ego and remember that you didn't come to this workshop to be the smartest person in the room. You came to this workshop to learn something, and I think that that's something a lot of people forget whenever they're in the workshop setting, because admittedly I feel like the dopamine kick from getting good reviews on your work is usually just such a high, right? But yeah, that shouldn't be your guiding principle for whether or not a workshop is successful. Number 2, remember that you are not the only person in this workshop. There are some people who don't read the full manuscript of work before going into a workshop, and that is sort of my pet peeve. A lot of people will just sort of focus on defending their work, focus on coming up with certain things to say about their work, and then they sort of forget that everyone else who's there, like the other fellows, have also put an equal amount of effort into the work that they submitted. And so the least that you could do is to read the work and provide a general critique of it if you can't go too in-depth into it. Like for example, there are some people in workshops who really don't know how to speak Tagalog. Like it's either they're from another province here in the Philippines, so their Tagalog just isn't, I guess, like as good as they would like it to be because they haven't had to use it for most of their lives. Or like most of us, they are just sort of a casualty of the colonial systems that are in place for our education. But either way, I think it's still good to read it, and even with those caveats, just to try and sort of say something about the work or to ask questions about the work. You don't always have to deliver like a genius critique of the work, especially if it's something that you're not too familiar with, but you can ask questions which open up discussion for the work and which may be generative to the author. Like maybe that's something that they haven't taken into consideration before, or maybe that's something that they had thought of before but kind of brushed off because they didn't think it would be relevant. So either way, yes, please come prepared. Read the work. This workshop setting is supposed to be a dialogue. It's supposed to be give and take. Yeah, so yeah, make sure that you're not just taking all of the critique for your work and not contributing anything. Third would be, whenever you do give critique, make sure that it's also delivered in a constructive way. I feel like a lot of the times when we're reading work, we have a tendency to be holding our pen like a butcher's knife, where it's like, okay, I'm here to find everything that is wrong with this work. I'm here to kind of break it down. Kakatayin ko tong pyesa na to. But that isn't necessarily what a workshop has to be about all the time, right? There's some works that don't adhere to the certain framework that you have in your mind of what you want this piece to be. So I think while it's important to give criticism, it's also important to ask yourself, are you looking for something within the work that isn't there? Like, are you looking for something within the work that is not something that the work seeks to present? So for example, if I were someone who writes, let's say, really long, sad novels about the Russian Revolution, let's say I'm Leo Tolstoy, and let's say I'm critiquing a work by like Haruki Murakami, who basically writes semi-plotless, super surreal fiction that takes place in Japan, where there's really no sense of timeline in his work sometimes. Would it be fair for me as Leo Tolstoy to demand of Haruki's work what I find pleasing in my own work and what I find pleasing or effective in the kinds of books that I write? So yeah, not really, right? And yeah, I just think that trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes when you give critique is also very, very important. My fourth tip would be to know when to stand up for yourself. I know that this might seem a little bit sort of counterintuitive to what I said earlier, but in the same way that sometimes you can tend to take things personally, there are also some people who will tend to attack you personally. An experience I had when I was in college is that I attended this workshop. At the time, this was for fiction because I used to write fiction. And one of the panelists had said that they were surprised that my story was written by a girl, or like by a female, because it was about certain things that were not female. And in that sense, I feel like it's okay to speak up. Like, it's okay to tell that person, hey, like that comment was a little bit sexist and a little bit off. And also, a lot of the times people are like, during a workshop, you should just allow people to critique your work and not say anything back. And I think the reason they say that is because there is a portion usually where the author can sort of address the comments and talk about their work in full. And I think that you should kind of maximize that portion. However, an exception to that, I think, is if you can already tell that people are reading the work wrong. And this might be an unpopular opinion, but if you think about it this way, if you allow everyone like in the room to go through their comments on this wrong or like different premise, on the one hand, that might say something about the effectivity of your work, but on the other hand, people will be talking about it based on this other premise, and you won't really be getting any good comments out of it. An example that I can provide is that back during our poetry workshop days, I had a poem that was about English as a second language, and from the get-go, the panelists thought that this was actually a poem about psychotherapy. And at that point, I kind of had to step in and correct them, because otherwise all of the comments that would come in would be talking about this work vis-a-vis psychotherapy, and I would not be able to get any more comments about how to improve it as a work that was about English as a second language. The only thing that I can sort of say is maybe it would be good to wait before you step in, because chances are someone else will also bring up that it's about something else, or someone will bring up that maybe this piece isn't really about that. So yeah, don't be afraid to defend yourself, but also think about it wisely and make sure that it's for a good reason. And when you do defend yourself, make sure that you also state the reason why you're saying it or why you're breaking out of the workshop format. Lastly, I would say always walk into a workshop with willingness to revise. I've met so many people who honestly go into a workshop and think, I'm not gonna revise anything about my work because it's perfect. Writing is not a one-shot kind of thing. It's a kind of thing that takes editing, it takes revising, and that is as much a part of the craft as the actual first burst of creative impetus. Yeah. And I just think that having that frame of mind will make workshops less upsetting and will make workshops a much more pleasant experience for you. And maybe this is already sort of going over my top 5 sort of tips, but just an additional thing that I think I need to mention. Maybe this can be like a bonus tip on how to filter, right? A lot of people can say a lot of things about your work, but at the end of the day, you are the writer, and you can filter which comments you think are useful and which ones you think are not. And yeah, and it's very important to be able to discern that. So that's it. That's it for this video, you guys. I hope that this was helpful, and good luck to all of you who are going to be going into workshops, if you are, or if you're not and you just thought that this was fun and you know you want to try it out when you critique stuff with your friends, then good luck as well, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!